he entered the Rebbe's chamber for private audience. Um, what does it mean, a birthday? Well, we're not going to have a class about birthday, but on the most elementary level, a birthday means that is the day your neshama enters your body. So until you were born, the neshama is independent from the body, because clearly you have a neshama in heaven, otherwise you would not have been born. So every neshama is sent down to a body. For how long will, of course, be depending on the mission of the neshama. But what is a birthday? The time that the neshama goes into a body, or to put it slightly differently, the time when the neshama permeates the physical. So until you're born, the physical and the spiritual are two separate things. That is why the fetus, as we were taught in our tradition, there's actually an angel teaching a Torah, but it's not yet alive. It's not yet, does not yet have a birthday. And its physicality is not on its own. It's an extension of the mother. As soon as we have birth and there's a separation between the fetus and the host, now suddenly we have independence. We have now a physical body that is alive. That means that the neshama, and which we'll call spiritual, and the body, which we will call physical, merge as one. So if that's the case, we have a better understanding that what Hasidus did for a Jewish person, as expressed in Lubavitch. As we know, Lubavitch is the town for which for over 102 years was the seat of the Chabad movement, the Rebbe's. Lubavitch was started by the second Rebbe of Chabad and continued until the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, who had to leave during the First World War, and he moved to Rostov. And then, of course, it was transferred eventually into Latvia, Poland, and America. Okay. So Lubavitch basically is the town, or what's a town that where the Rebbe's would teach the teachings of Hasidus. So the Shmuel Betzalel, the Rashba, a very great Chassid, he considered the day he arrived in Lubavitch as his birthday, because again, I don't know if this is what he meant, but I'm suggesting what he might have felt when he came into Lubavitch was a birthday type of a feeling, the day that he understood why his neshama is in his body, or how to make peace between his soul and his body, which only Chasidus Chabad can do. For that reason, with the second part of the Hayom Yom also is very significant. When he came into the Rebbe for his private audience, that private audience called Yechidus, being alone, one of its accomplishments is that it takes the philosophy of Chabad, the philosophy of Hasidus, and brings it down into a practical reality. In other words, you look at the Rebbe, if lahavdil, we can make a separation. We have today coaching, right? You could have someone that coaches you in exercise, and then you have, I think they call it a life coach, someone that helps you process your feelings and how to do it, how to interact with others on an incredibly high level, much higher than these two things that I mentioned. The Rebbe is your practical guide of how do I take all of the truth of Hasidus and Kabbalah and apply it. When you put on tefillin, one of the most important intentions is the fact that the tefillin are put on the hand. The tefillin are also, the hand tefillin is opposite the heart. And then there's a part of the set of tefillin is on your head. The rabbis tell us that if you look at it, we have all three things connected. We have mind, that's the head. We have emotions, that's the heart. And then we have action, which is the hand. So when a person puts on tefillin, one of the many intentions is, may I translate, may I take in a practical sense my allegiance to God, may I apply it in my mind, in my heart, and most of all, in action. So now when Rav Shmuel Betzalel came to Lubavitch, he was already a very learned, a young man, very learned, but he was looking for something deeper. He felt he wasn't connecting to that. His essence was not connecting to God. He was going through all of the motions, and he was happy being a Jew, studying Torah. He was a tremendous scholar, and there was something, the neshama was missing. When he came to Lubavitch and he learned Chassidus, this made his neshama and his body unite. And when he saw the Rebbe for the first time, that was the equivalent of putting on tefillin, because the Rebbe showed him how to use his mind, heart to motivate the action. So it's a very beautiful Hayom Yom, much to think about. I'll just mention a very interesting thing, which is really not completely related, but I'll say it anyway. Yesterday, with the WhatsApp, you get all kinds of different people pass on different ideas and so on. So someone passed on a very interesting 3-minute clip of the Rebbe talking to a chaplain. His name is Elimelech. I can't remember right now his last name. He's a U.S. Army chaplain, Jewish, of course. His name is Elimelech, and he's in Frankfurt, Germany. So he's dressed in uniform. He's standing to get a letter. To get $1 from the Holy Rebbe. So he was brought to the Rebbe by Chaplain Goldstein, who's actually a colonel, because he's there for many, many years. And he brings this gentleman in front of the Rebbe. And it's nice to see, because they're both wearing their U.S. Army uniform. And he says, Rebbe, this is Elimelech, I forget his last name. He's the chaplain in Frankfurt, Germany. The Rebbe looks at him and says, you sent me, I have a letter from you. So he says, Rebbe, I didn't send you any letter. So the Rebbe then says, no, I don't mean today. I mean in the past. And you see the chaplain saying, oh yeah, that's true. During training, I was in Arizona and I wrote you a letter. So the Rebbe gives him $1, wishes him success. Very beautiful. And of course, was sort of blown away how the Rebbe remembered that he had received a letter from this gentleman, from this chaplain, Elimelech. He couldn't remember himself. So Dov Ber Berkowitz from, not Palo Alto, but from Walnut Creek, he sends an explanation. He says, I heard the story from the shliach in Arizona. What happened is that this gentleman, he's religious, but very far from being a chassid. He almost prides himself in not being a chassid. But he's religious, obviously, and he loves Jewish people. He's a chaplain in the army. So he became very friendly with the shliach, whose name is Shem Tov, in Arizona. So he would eat in his house, etc., etc. What happened was that this chaplain, I think at this time he was still undergoing training. Either that or was his first posting. He didn't have any children, and he was married, I don't know how many years, but he was upset. So when he's by the chassid, the shliach, he mentions that he doesn't have any children. So the shliach says, why don't you write the Lubavitcher Rebbe? So he says, look, this is not my style. Your shluchim, I have a great respect for you, and I have great respect for your rabbi, but I'm not a chassid. He sort of implied that he's not really into miracles and hocus pocus from holy people. So the shliach is telling him, look, what do you got to lose? Write a letter. If you're fortunate and you get an answer, then you'll know very clearly what you should be doing to get this special blessing. If you don't get an answer, that doesn't mean the Rebbe didn't read it. He read it. When the Rebbe reads your letter, you get a blessing, even if he doesn't respond. So he says, sure. So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe describing himself and asking for either a blessing, advice, or maybe both for children. He never got a response. So when he stands now 7 years after this, is 7 years, the Rebbe had received probably, it's hard for me even to imagine, with thousands of letters for sure. The question is how many, is it 30,000? I don't know, but thousands of letters over this 7 years. And he just heard the name. This is Elimelech so-and-so. And the Rebbe tells him, I got a letter from you. And he says, no, I didn't give you a letter. And the Rebbe says, no, in the past. Said, oh, yeah. So Rabbi Shem Tov says a sequel. He never got an answer. But the following year, I think he had a baby boy. And then 18 months later, he had a baby girl. So here's an answer without getting a formal answer. I mean, I say this because it's so important for us to be reminded of the dedication of the Rebbe to his Hasidim. And it's almost unbelievable, basically, how a tzaddik who is limited in the body of a human could have such I don't know how to say it, such commitment to the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that somehow communicated to the Rebbe. And that's why, actually when we learned the Tanya, which was written by the first Rebbe of Chabad, as I often point out, all the Rebbes are connected. All the Rebbes are connected. The Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe is the Rebbe. But also when I teach it, I try actually to look a little bit into some of the teachings of the Rebbe, and that actually helps us understand the holy words of the Tanya a lot deeper. So we're supposed to start chapter 9 today, but it's there's no but. However, I do want to repeat something at the end of chapter 8. Chapter 8 ends off with this idea of Tshuva Ilah, right? The higher level of Teshuvah. And if you recall, we spoke about that there are two letters, hey, there are two in the word Yud, not the word, in God's name, Yud, there's a hey, there's a vav, there's a hey. The last letter hey symbolizes action. And through sin, and we ruin or separate or blemish through our action, our connection to God. So that letter hey has to be brought back. And then there's a higher level of tshuva where a person loves God and fears God and does the mitzvot, especially when he studies Torah with love and fear. And that level is not dealing with the action that was blemished, which is the second hey, but rather it's the first hey, which is closely related to chachma, wisdom of God, which is the letter Yud. I also shared with you some teachings that Tshuva Tata, the lower level of Teshuvah, is connected to remorse and bitterness. The higher level of Tshuva is primarily focusing on the joy of being close. So Tshuva Tata, the lower level of Tshuva, takes into account the distance, and the pain of being separated, whereas the higher level of tshuva is the celebration of being close. And I gave some examples, etc. What I want to do is review something very important. When we're talking about levels of tshuva, we have to understand this is connected to what he said in chapter 7. There's a path of tshuva. And then there's tshuva itself. Let me try to explain this. If you have never learned and studied Torah in the original, so you don't even know how to read Hebrew, opening up a Talmud and trying to make sense of the Aramaic is leaping into the unknown. There is a seder, there's an order. First, you learn how to read Hebrew. Even if you're going to do it without learning Hebrew, first you start with the Chumash, and then you go to the Mishnayos, and then you go to the Gemara, etc. In other words, it's step by step. And if you're daring, you could take maybe 2 steps at a time. But no one leaps from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder when it comes to study. You're not going to get it. There has to be a seder. Again, what does the word seder mean? There has to be a logical sequence. Step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. Even when it comes to fulfilling a mitzvah, you don't, it's, for example, you just found out about tefillin, okay? So you're 43 years old, and for some reason you were surfing and you saw people putting on tefillin on the Western Wall, and you get excited. I'm a Jew, I want to connect to God, but there's no tefillin in your house. So if you just take a mezuzah and you tape it to your arm, that's not tefillin. There's an order. You have to start from somewhere. You might have to go to the shul. You might have to borrow, but you can't. And if you're making your own tefillin, it's a very long process. The same thing about many of the commandments, right? It's Rosh Hashanah and you're somewhere and you realize, oh, I have to hear the shofar. Okay, I can't hear the shofar. I'll play the violin. Silly, right? When it comes to tshuva, there is no order. That basically means if there was an order, then if there was, I use the word sequence, or if there was a logical progression, it would be like this. First, I have to find out what I did wrong. Then I have to find out why is it wrong. And then I have to think a little bit about to whom did I do something wrong. So that would be step by step to return to God. But tshuva is not step by step. A thought of tshuva, even a random thought of tshuva, is valid teshuva. And the most famous story, which we've already discussed, it's in the Talmud and it's quoted extensively in all of the books, holy books that discuss the efficacy of tshuva. They all quote this Talmud, the story of this terrible Jew, maybe not even a good human being, a very selfish, self-centered person who was looking for pleasure all of his life. And then when it struck him how worthless he is, he did tshuva. And it doesn't say how long. It says he thought about who he is, cried, and his soul left him. He died. And when his soul left him, a heavenly voice came out and said, you are a rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer ben Dudaya. You would think that after he realized how worthless he is, then he would go to a yeshiva. Or maybe he would spend 40 days fasting and praying, only eating bread and water at night. That, we could imagine step by step trying to undo a little bit of the damage. But the Gemara says that's not what happened. It struck him it was with a clarity that he is a Jew and he is so far from God that even the person he sinned with said, "You're worthless." And that contriteness that he had made him a tzaddik. So when we're talking about the different levels of tshuva, tshuva tata, you have to change your action. Tshuva ilah, you study Torah with love and with fear. And he said that you have time where you're supposed to be introspection and then awaken compassion on your soul and hit yourself over the head by honestly appraising your spiritual worth, and you'll see it's very, very deficient. All of that is true. But those are levels in tshuva. So the reason why I'm emphasizing it is, first of all, I saw it in the Rebbe's writings, but I'm imagining that the reason why it's crucial for us to be reminded of this is because doing tshuva properly is an avodah. It's not easy. It's a very strenuous process. I'm not talking about how long the process is, because when in matters of the heart, it's time is really irrelevant. You don't need hours to love someone or to hate someone. You could love and hate literally in minutes. And the anguish that a person has in a moment might be more than the anguish that a person suffers over years. So when it comes to the emotional, spiritual dimensions, it's not a question of time, but without a doubt, it is an avodah. It is a divine service. It does not come haphazardly or easily. So but you have to remember that is proper to tshuva. But the tshuva itself actually is a moment. So I'll say something that we spoke about in the past. If a person, for example, stole someone else's car, he did a double sin. He caused a human being, his neighbor, distress and a loss, in addition to which he broke God's law. If he just says he's sorry to God, he's not completely forgiven. Why? Because he sinned against man. If he goes to his neighbor and apologizes and asks for forgiveness, that's also not enough, because he broke God's law. He needs both. And yet, from the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Dudaya, or from a very famous law that, and we've spoken about this, but I'll repeat it anyway, that if a person, the law is when a man proposes marriage to a woman, there's supposed to be an honesty between them. So, for example, if you don't have a job and you borrow someone else's car and someone else's suit, and you wow the lady and you tell her, "Oh, I'm very well off," and she finds out that basically you're homeless, there's no marriage. The betrothal is invalid because she wanted to marry you based on a certain premise, and the premise wasn't really true. The same thing would be if, let's say, you propose marriage to her and she's beautiful, and then you ask her, any health issues? No. Then you find out she has stage 3 cancer, chas v'shalom. Of course, you have the choice of staying with her, but then you also have the option of saying, that's not the woman I proposed marriage to. I asked, and she explicitly said, I have no issues with health. I am healthy. So there was a lie. So we know that in order for a betrothal or a proposal of marriage to be valid legally, there has to be a truthfulness between them, certainly not a lie. So ask the Gemara, what happens if a person does not eat kosher, does not keep Shabbos, and frankly is not very honest either. But he's interested in a religious girl because he knows that religious women are wonderful, wonderful human beings. They're loyal, they're faithful. So he borrows a black hat and he puts on his white shirt and he meets this girl and he says, you know, we share so many things in common. So I think we should make a go of it. And she says, tell me the truth. Are you religious? He says, well, I don't want to be a big shot, but I'm a tzaddik. And she says, okay, that's a major thing for me. I want to marry a tzaddik. And he gives her the ring in front of two people. And then she finds out that this guy is a liar. He doesn't keep Shabbos and he doesn't keep kosher. How could he be a tzaddik? So she says, you know what? When he gave me the ring, the whole thing was false. So we're not betrothed. Here's back your ring and I'm out of here. Say the rabbis, it's not so simple. Maybe when he proposed, he actually regretted his past. And when he said, I'm a tzaddik, he actually meant to be a tzaddik. And if that's the case, on some level, he is a tzaddik. So now he's a tzaddik who's a sinner. Not a sinner who multiplied his sin, magnified his sin by telling a lie. No, he was a sinner who, in a moment, became a tzaddik, and that on that moment, she accepted his betrothal, and now he's a tzaddik that's falling from his level. So it's not so simple, and there's all kinds of details. Essentially, they have to write a bill of divorce as if it was a real marriage, and at the same time, it's not a real bill of divorce. It's written because of a question. The point of it is that 1 minute ago, I just told you that if you steal a car and you fast and ask God for forgiveness, you're not forgiven completely because you owe someone else's car, right? You took someone's car. And here I just told you another thing, that here's a car thief who's making believe that he's religious and says, I'm betrothing you on the condition you should know that I am actually a righteous person. And the rabbis, not jokingly, actually felt that there was credibility to that. So how do you put the two together? The answer is there are levels of tshuva. A person that has a thought, how long does that thought have to be? The answer is a moment. If a person has a moment where he thinks to himself, I regret what I did. I am not acting to my potential. I'm not acting Jewishly. And I want to act Jewishly, that is teshuvah. Is it a proper teshuvah? Is it a long-lasting teshuvah? No. But it is teshuvah. If you want it to be a proper teshuvah, so now there's confession, right? You have to say confession. There's the idea of fasting or praying or giving a lot of charity. Then the Alter Rebbe said in chapter 7, there's this idea of, no, it's not going to come easy. You have to spend some time awakening compassion because you don't realize yourself how ugly you are, spiritually speaking. And then, so look what you're doing to your soul. And then after all said and done, it's not enough. You have to really examine yourself. So until you become disgusting in your own eyes. And only then is your tshuva restoring the hay back to the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. But you have to remember the name of God, which we are restoring to perfect harmony, is only a name of God. There's something beyond that. God has a name. God precedes his name. So there's a level of tshuva where the Jew is connected to God who told him to do teshuvah. And that explains a little bit, this I will end for today, that explains a little bit on Yom Kippur. There's a whole discussion, of course, as we get closer to Yom Kippur, we'll review this at great depth, but there's a whole discussion about if you fast on Yom Kippur, but you don't really say confession. You know, you're hungry, so you decide that you want to sleep a whole day of Yom Kippur, but you're fasting. So you fast like this. This is what happened. Kol Nidre starts at 6:45. So you said to yourself, you had your meal, 6:45, you say, God, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement is coming. I'm fasting, but I find it very difficult. So you won't see me until the end of the fast. And that's it. You stay in bed for 24 hours. Did Yom Kippur have any effect on you? Well, spiritually, it did. Physically, you might feel like you didn't do anything, so you're the same lout, you're the same brute as you were before. Spiritually speaking, you're in a mikveh. Because there's a part of you, your essence of the soul, which was purified on Yom Kippur because you recognized that this is a day that God has given the Jewish people for atonement. Many levels of tshuva. So again, one more time, what we're learning is to do how the Alter Rebbe is helping us do a proper teshuvah. But we should never forget, a thought of tshuva is absolutely tshuva as well. The Rebbe would often, again, the Rebbe is a lover of Israel. So I don't know if there were how many human beings on earth loved Israel as the Rebbe. I mean, you have to go back to the biblical times. Moses loved his people, even those that worshipped idols. The Rebbe loved Klal Yisrael, and he often said that we are ready for the blessings of Mashiach, because it says that before Mashiach comes, the Jewish people will return to God. Every Jew, that's what he said, every Jew has had, at the very least, a thought of return. That means there isn't a Jew alive, the Rebbe says, that hasn't at least once in his lifetime thought about, I should be a better Jew, or I should be a more vibrant Jew, or to say it more accurately, I wish I had God in my life. And if every single Jew, wherever they might be, has experienced that moment of tshuva, then we're all tzaddikim. We're tzaddikim that have fallen, but we're still tzaddikim. And in that merit, the Rebbe would always taina to Hashem as a plea and as a defense to his holy people that he defended. Hashem, bring us redemption. We're all good. Everyone had a thing of tshuva. And the Rebbe often said that after the horrible experience of the Jewish people through those terrible years, which is loosely called the Holocaust, how could it be that a person didn't think about Hashem? Certainly, there's a yearning for goodness and godliness to be revealed on earth. Okay, so today's Rosh Chodesh. It's a happy day. It's going to be a great Shabbos. 3 Torahs being read. And let's hope and pray the Mashiach comes and we should have a very happy and healthy month of Adar. Good Shabbos to all of you.